Zoom, yeah? Okay, I'm so sorry. So I'll just sing the prayer of what I just said in English. You can all hear me now, can you? Yes, okay. Okay. Sangye, Chedan Soke Chognamla, Ajan Chobadu Dagni Kyapsu Chi, Dagi Chanyen Gipe Sonam Ki, Drola Penche, Sangye Drupa Shok, Sangye Chedan Soke Chognamla, Ajan Chobadu Dagni Kyapsu Chi. Dagi Chanyen Gipe Sonam Ki, Drola Penche, Sangye Drupa Shok, Sangye Chedan Soke Chognamla, Ajan Chobadu Dagni Kyapsu Chi. Dagi Chanyen Gipe Sonam Ki, Drola Penche Sangye Drupa Shog. Well, I think I want to talk about dissatisfaction, reading about Matthew Perry, that lovely man. I live 1 block away. I live on Bedford, and that friend's apartment's on the corner of Grove, supposedly on the corner of Grove and Bedford. So every day you go there, there's very few people come down my street, but you always see people there taking pictures of the apartment. And then, of course, now there's all these flowers and things for Matthew Perry there. So I was thinking about, I remember, I read the newspapers. You can tell I'm old. I mean, even though I put things on social media, I don't read social media. I don't go there for my information. I go to Financial Times, New York Times, the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal, New Yorker, Vanity Fair, Vogue. I'm serious. I subscribe to all of them. I mean, it's all about human beings, isn't it? So, people are writing about. So one person was writing about, because she was an addict as well. She said she was an addict, talking about her interpretation of him. Another person talking about it was loneliness, loneliness, they say. And that's a really powerful point, loneliness. So let's look at that, because we take the Buddhist analysis, it's totally interesting, Totally fascinating. So loneliness is this feeling, isn't it, that we have no one to share our life with in one way or another, no one to talk to, no one to see what we're doing, no one to hear about what we think and what we're doing. Would people agree with that? Mm-hmm. Is that what sounds like loneliness? You agree, isn't it? And I think to one degree or another, we all feel that. And so the Buddhist analysis is always coming down to this ridiculous word, attachment. I mean, if you say Buddha says attachment is the main cause of suffering, and if you look at the Four Noble Truths, which is his first teaching, effectively it's all about suffering, the causes, how to get rid of it, and that you can. And he would say attachment is the main cause of suffering. Now, you hear that statement, and it sounds like a joke, because we don't even have the same interpretation as Buddha. And when we do hear the interpretation, it seems so kind of simplistic. It's like a joke. What are you talking about? That's the main cause of suffering. So it needs a lot of analysis, If this is the way things are, if Buddha's view has got some truth in it, we need to unpack it, So what's fascinating is the loneliness. So attachment then, what is attachment? If attachment is the cause of this, loneliness, and it's hard to see the connection immediately if we hear the word, let's look at what it is, let's unpack it. So if attachment is the main source of all our suffering, we better look at it, So then we have to remember, all the time, this is taking from the Buddhist perspective of the mind. And in the Buddhist view of the mind, you've got the neurotic, unhappy, I-based, fear-based states of mind that are the source of our suffering, and therefore why we make a mess of our lives and harm others to whatever degree. Look at the world, Kind of like the voices of ego, if you like, kind of ironically. Then you've got the positive qualities. And even though with these, we sound very simple, we know love, compassion, kindness, we know jealousy, anger, depression. We know that the first lot are nice and the second lot are horrible. Not being judgmental, we know how they feel. But so it seems, again, fairly simplistic, especially if we compare with the material, the modern psychological view or the modern neuroscientific views. It sounds very kind of simplistic, very simple, very cute, So we've got these two categories of states of mind, basically. So we kind of know this, but why Buddha makes a distinction between them and says it's crucial. And if you want to use the Buddha's approach to life, his approach to life, to lessen which is to lessen your unhappiness and to grow your happiness, speaking really simply, that means, you've got to lessen the neuroses and grow the virtues. lessen the non-virtues and grow the virtues. And we never talk like that in modern psychology. It sounds very judgmental. So this is the way Buddha talks. We better know what he means by that. So these unhappy states of mind, these neurotic states of mind, these deluded states of mind, these neurotic emotions, these afflicted emotions, all these terms, whatever you like, we are utterly familiar with them. So that the point for the Buddha, why he distinguishes between them, and this is the point that's quite radical and like laughable from the modern psychological view, the Buddha has found that this unhappy lot are not at the core of our being and eventually can be utterly eradicated. I mean, that is beyond hilarious. Remember, one person who heard this for the first time, she burst into laughter, and it's appropriate. Because why? Because in our models of the mind, our neuroscientific view and the psychological models, we all recognize those unhappy states. But we so take them as a given, we so take them as normal, and what we mean by that is that you'd be weird if you didn't have them. There's nothing in neuroscience that would suggest that you can get rid of, the parts. It implies you've got to get rid of the parts of the brain that show anger, depression, anxiety, jealousy, and so on and so forth. That's just kind of weird with our view in the modern world. So to hear Buddha's view is it just doesn't seem reasonable, But this is his point. The whole meaning of the word nirvana, not someplace like heaven. It's the word you can use to refer to your mind when you've done the job that he says can be done, which he says he's done, and which he gives us the methodology to do. And it's been there for 2,500 years, so it's up to us to try. The main point, and this is where even if we might not get that in this life, because he would say it takes, the mind continues, he would say that. We mightn't achieve it soon, but I think what's encouraging is his view that this stuff is not at the core of our being and eventually can be removed. Long-term goal, long-time job, don't hold your breath. So that's encouraging. That's encouraging, because I think what happens is when things go wrong, we get utterly depressed and hopeless. We believe it's permanent. We believe it's forever. Why do you think we kill ourselves? Because we can't see the light at the end of the tunnel. So we even can have some recognition that it's possible, even to hypothesize, well, is it possible really that I can lessen these neuroses? Wow, that's optimistic. So how then is attachment the source of this, the suffering that we could point to with Mr. Matthew Perry, who's in the news at the moment because the fellow died? How that type of suffering he expressed that he had, self-loathing, never enough, never satisfied, therefore, junkie, alcoholic, blah, 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 blah. What's the relationship, Well, attachment is this simple word, but it's basically, I always say it's multifaceted. And one way of describing it is this primordially deep, it is true, literally a feeling, a sense of dissatisfaction, meaning not only do I not have enough, whatever I've got is not enough, whatever I've achieved is not enough, whatever I am, it is not enough. And it's beyond intellect. You don't get taught it, Matthew Perry's mummy didn't teach him this. It's in the bones of our being. Okay, the Buddhist view is we came with it from past lives because we practiced attachment for countless eons, he would say. That's his trip. But it's an interesting concept. You don't get it from mummy and daddy and grandpa, or from God, or Buddha or anybody else. It doesn't come from the outside. It's in one's own mind. And this dissatisfaction is a consequence of practicing attachment. So attachment in a proactive way is emotional hunger. So why would you be emotionally hungry? Guess what? Because you don't feel you've got enough. You're hungry for food because you feel your stomach's empty. Well, you're hungry for this or that or whatever because you don't feel you have enough. So it makes sense, Emotional hunger is a proactive approach of attachment based upon feeling dissatisfaction. So attachment can be the most obvious level, when you look at the Buddhist teachings, the very first level of practice is very, control your body and speech in relation to what? The object of attachment. You don't jump on every girl, or boy you feel like. You don't eat every piece of cake you feel like. You don't kill every person you feel like. You try to harness the energy of your body and speech, which are driven by these neuroses, which cause you suffering and which cause you to harm others. That's the very first level. Control your body and speech. Be a nice person. Behave nicely. So some people, this attachment, okay, so you could argue in his case, because he's in the newspapers, not trying to be judgmental, his dissatisfaction expressed itself, he said, in terms of feeling not good enough, but it also expressed itself, therefore, in, sex and drugs and rock and roll. I don't know about the sex part, but or about the rock and roll part, but mainly the other things, the objects of the objects of attachment. Now, some people are going to be attached to killing and stealing, and we would not feel sorry for them, would we? Oh, the poor thing is attached, he's a junkie to killing. No, we just like to put him in prison and kill him. But it's the same thing. If you wake up in this life with a tendency to kill fish, I'm not being rude about anybody. You're attached to fish, killing fish. Or you're attached to killing people. Or like a friend of mine on death row in Kentucky, he's attached to torturing people. My friend Mitchell is a Buddhist, says, Robina, he thinks of torture all the time. One of the symptoms of attachment is you think of it all the time. So in his case, the main way he always expressed his attachment was in terms of being dissatisfied about himself. And that's the deepest way we feel it. So this attachment is attachment to being, literally, to being seen and heard. To being seen and heard. More simple, to being liked. They talk about it, they say it's attachment to approval. But that, in a sense, is what it is too. Since you're a little girl, since you're a little boy, like apparently I read today in the New York Times somebody talking about him who read his biography, read his memoir, published a couple of years ago or last year or something, how he'd always hungered for his mother's approval. And soon before she died, she said, I'm proud of you. And he said, I wish you'd told me that earlier. I waited to hear that all my life. And then she said, well, what about some forgiveness? So she's craving him to forgive her, and he's craving her to love him. So this is how we all are in relationships. It's like this nightmare, isn't it? I never feel, no matter how much you tell me you love me, I don't believe it. This is like beyond heartbreaking. And no matter how much, or you think you're telling me you love me all the time, but I say you never tell me you love me. And you can't believe it. You think you're telling me you love me all the time, but I don't notice because it's never enough. I mean, we ought to be weeping with compassion for ourselves because we all recognize this, And I always use a simple example. 27 people can praise you. 1 million, 10 million, 100 million people praised Matthew Perry, adored the ground he walked on. He didn't believe one word of it. It's like water off a duck's back, Why? Because he believed the opposite. So 27 people can say you're a nice person. You're hungry to hear it, but you don't believe it. And then one person criticizes and you go like a magnet because you believe every word they say. This is utter proof, of the depth of this terrible suffering state of mind. Not criticism. We should be having compassion for ourselves. So then we have to do, it's like, attachment, the very first level of Buddhist teachings, he doesn't go on about this one. He goes on about simple attachment to sex and drugs and rock and roll. Just calm yourself down, Robina. Keep your hand in your lap, Behave nicely. A little bit of cake, a little bit of sex, a little bit of drugs. Not too much. Calm yourself down. Don't feed bottomless pit of attachment. And the point is this adventure where we start to realize this is the point. This is the point. This is the point. Well, always say this is the point. That's all the point. When we understand that we have mental consciousness, Buddhism talks about the mind, and there's two ways it functions. One is sensory, one is mental. So this is profound, and we can hear it. Sensory consciousness, eye consciousness, ear consciousness, tongue consciousness, tactile consciousness. Conscious or mind, they're used synonymously in Buddhism, and they're referring to the non-physical energy. It's not your brain. Brain plays a role. Yep. Your eyeball plays a role. Yep. But that's not your consciousness. Consciousness, spelling it out, is that eye consciousness is that part of your mind that is not physical, that functions through the medium of the eyeball to have a cognition. The mind cognizes things. Every millisecond of your mind, sensory or mental, is cognizing something. So eye consciousness actually cognizes only two things, shape and color. Taste consciousness only cognizes mere taste, salty, sweet, whatever. Ear consciousness merely cognizes rough, sound, loud, soft. They're very, in other words, sensory consciousnesses, the five, are profoundly limited in their capacity for cognition. So, when we feel dissatisfied, which is a mental state, this is the thing about mental consciousness. There's sensory consciousness, and then there's mental, and that's where the workshop is, as Lama Zopa puts it. So the example I always use, which is always so helpful, when I say there is a very pretty cup, and I would say that's pleasing design to my eye, I would say that's we all think my eyes are seeing a pretty cup. No, my eyes are only seeing shape and color. So you have to ask the question, this is the point now, what part of my mind then is cognizing pretty cup, well-designed cup? Well, that's not your eyeball. That's your mental consciousness. So quicker than Google, and I really mean it, the millisecond my eyes go there, instantaneously my mental consciousness, where the workshop is, where all the thoughts and feelings and emotions and opinions and ideas and attachment and anger and jealousy and dissatisfaction and craving and love and blah, 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 that's where all that is. And within a millisecond, coming from my mental consciousness, out of my mouth comes a thought, a concept. What a well-designed cup. So satisfaction and dissatisfaction is like dissatisfaction is another word for pleasure, for sort of like pleasure, really. Dissatisfaction is like, it's more primordial than that. But the dissatisfaction, when you're dissatisfied, that what I'm getting at, that is a mental state. It's a concept. Deeply ingrained, deeply habituated, deeply instinctive. So, but we feel it achingly, don't we? So if you happen to be attached to food, that's where you go for your satisfaction, isn't it? If you're attached to, some people are so attached to their body, they'll never overeat because they're more attached to the way their body looks. So their attachment goes to that. Another person is attached to alcohol. So we assume when you're dissatisfied, which is a mental state, that doing a physical action like eating will bring the satisfaction. But it's not possible. Please hear me. Satisfaction, if it's a mental state, a physical thing can't cause it, can't make it go away. Not possible. Impossible. They're separate parts of your mind. So, eating, I remember this example, on the television, and they have these different, like people who have big, sad habits, like people who, like, these sometimes weird habits, like, eating glue every day, or so one would be the person who eats a lot, and 600 pounds. This little girl was 600 pounds, and her mother, because she's attached to food, right, basically, and her mother said, oh, she's always been like this. She never felt full. Well, think about that. Full is a physical feeling of your stomach being full. That's physical. That's sensory consciousness. Can you hear my point? That's sensory consciousness. Feeling full is one thing, but satisfaction is mental. We're communicating, right? Yeah. This should blow our minds. So eating cake cannot bring satisfaction. Having 27 boys every day cannot bring satisfaction. Buddhist says it, but it always sounds so judgmental. I'm not allowed to have pleasure. But it's technical. Oh, are we communicating? Yeah. I know I sound hysterical all the time, but are we communicating? And why? It's because we are addicted to the body. As Swami says, we make the body the boss. It's not being judgmental, it's not being puritanical. It's heartbreaking. So I know as a kid, I'm attached to food, right? When I'm doing my morning practice, I'm looking forward to my breakfast, my nice coffee. It's one little twirler thing that makes it a bit fluffy. Someone got me one of those little things you twirl the milk and it goes fluffy. And you understand? So, I mean, so as a kid, of course, I would eat until I felt full. But then and this is the point that Buddha's making technically, and it's always very depressing to hear it. We all know, first of all, attachment, just forget loneliness now, just go back to the cake for a minute. Attachment is a mental state. It is a concept that we've programmed our mind for infinite long time that is now primordially at the level of instinct. So attachment has one function of exaggerating. First of all, it has the feeling of dissatisfaction. So then you think, oh, what's missing? And then you think, oh, cake. So then then attachment shifts from dissatisfaction to anticipation. So then you go to get the cake, building up the excitement, waiting for the cake, isn't it? I think the anticipation of the pleasure of the contact with the object, especially when it's a new boy, is the most sublime part of attachment, the anticipation, right? So all the anticipation building up to get the cake. You're thinking about it, you're analysing it, you're visualising it, you're waiting, you're doing everything to get the cake, and finally the cake is there, and you see it on the plate. The next function of attachment, it ridiculously over-exaggerates the deliciousness of that brown triangle on the plate. Again, thinking that your eyes are seeing a delicious cake. Don't be ridiculous. Your eyes see shape and colour. Your mind goes chocolate cake. Your mind goes, then attachment, and that's a valid cognition. It is chocolate cake. It is brown, valid, tick. But then attachment is kicking in and dominating the whole conversation, and that exaggerates the deliciousness. That's its big job, exaggerates the deliciousness, and then completely exaggerates the joy and satisfaction that will come upon contact with it when it gets in that hole. Not this one. You don't make a mistake. Where do I put the cake, mummy? No, it's instinct. We know where to go, you know. And then you put the cake in, waiting, building up, waiting for the satisfaction or the pleasure to come, and therefore the satisfaction. So pleasure does come. A pleasant feeling does arise, that's a fact. But the biggest tragedy is attachment's right next to it. Pleasure is one state of mind. Attachment's right there, shifting from anticipation. And the moment the cake goes in the mouth, the anticipation turns, no, the anticipation is now gone. You get the taste, and it is pleasant. But at that second, this is the tragedy of attachment, it isn't satisfied with it. That second, and it's the best piece of pleasure you'll get. It's downhill from there. But that second attachment saying not enough. So you've got to put the second mouthful in, and then the third mouthful, and the third piece, and the fourth piece, until what? Until you want to vomit. So attachment goes from dissatisfaction, anticipation, the build-up, the excitement, and then you get the cake and you're still not satisfied. That's the tragedy. So you want another piece, hoping the next piece will do it, and another piece. And before you know it, the pleasure has turned into disgust. And you now will vomit if you eat one more piece. And what are you left with? A stuffed stomach and more dissatisfaction. That is the utter heartbreaking tragedy of following attachment. So with loneliness, it's the same. People in relationships can be more lonely than anyone living in a cave. Because no matter what we get from that person, never enough. I remember one person who was trying to make her mum happy. She was like 45, the daughter, and she even totally caught up in this terrible bind, sometimes with our mums, and the terrible attachment our mums have, and their terrible dissatisfaction and their terrible possessiveness, because that's another function of attachment. And she kept trying to do more. All the guilt, we all have that. The guilt, it's her job to make mummy happy. So then eventually she moved in with mummy because mummy wanted it, and she even started sleeping in the same bed as mummy. She was 45, the daughter. Do you understand? Still, mummy was never happy. You understand? We understand this. She was still never happy. So you could give your mother your blood. You could feed your limbs to her for breakfast, and she still won't be happy, because happiness, satisfaction comes from the person, not from the object. This is the Buddha's analysis. I think we can all hear it. Do you understand? So loneliness is the deepest, is a symptom of the deepest attachment of all, the most subtle, the one I think that finally goes before, is the one that finally goes before you heal this schizophrenic split personality, this unhappy, disconnected sense of self. When you finally realize emptiness, when you realize that the non-duality, that you're not a separate I, which sounds so abstract, it's like a joke. Finally, this craving to be seen and heard is the last one to go. Sex and drugs and rock and roll is nothing in comparison. So so this seems almost like a joke then. So what if sex and drugs and rock and roll and cakes and all the rest are not the solution, to get satisfaction? What is? If dissatisfaction, attachment, is a mental state, then the solution has to be mental. So if attachment is a concept, fundamentally it is at the bones of our being, but it's totally programmed, so it's completely, we only notice it at the level of feeling because we've had it for so long. Then it has to be conceptual. The work has to be conceptual. And the thing is, though, it's not going to go overnight. So it's the same thing. I use this example all the time, but please try and get them. We know we can turn our mind into the mind of a musician. We know that. We know you can start off knowing zero musical theory. It's a mental state, isn't it? The fingers play piano, but where does it come from? The brilliance of the mental state, the brilliance of all the concepts in your head. Music's highly sophisticated conceptual stuff, isn't it? Like, say, musical theory is incredibly sophisticated theory. It's conceptual. Hear about it. Please hear that. It's conceptual. It's thoughts. It's clever thoughts, like math. It's just the same as math. It's very complex. It's all conceptual. So you can start off with knowing no musical theory. And you can slowly, not overnight, train your mind to become full of sophisticated musical theory. And you know that you can train your hands to express that theory on the piano. We know we can do that, and we know it might take 30 years. And we're happy doing it, and we keep doing it, and we keep doing it, and we'll keep getting better at it. We know it's possible. We know it's possible to do the same with cooking, with tennis. Any skill, we know it's possible, but we don't know it's possible when it comes to becoming a happy person. That's our tragedy. We're brilliant at these other skills, but we don't realize that becoming a happy person is the same process. Changing your concepts, radically changing our concepts. That really is the Buddhist approach. So if attachment is this feeling of loneliness, which is a very deep manifestation of attachment. It's not as it's deeply primordial. Your mother didn't teach you. And our problem in our culture is we assume if you're lonely, it's because your mother didn't appreciate you. But your mother might really appreciate you, but because your attachment and your neediness and your dissatisfaction are so primordial, you don't notice she appreciates you because it's never enough for you. It's never enough. Another person who is more satisfied, a person can be born with more satisfaction, more contentment, and have a very mean mother, and they won't suffer so badly. But we don't factor that in our culture. We assume you come as a blank slate, and then mummy proceeds to create you. But this is the radical difference here. And we know it's true. Some people have terrible mothers, and that really just water off a duck's back for them. Some people have mothers that aren't that bad, if you think about it, when you hear it comparatively, and the person suffers terribly, We know this, but we don't join the dots like this because we assume it's only from the outside. But the Buddhist one, factors in what's in here. So, of course, we know we're dissatisfied. But we think if you tell me you love me more, I'll start getting satisfied. But we just don't notice that I have to also practice being satisfied. I have to practice being satisfied. I have to practice being content. So how do you do that? You change the thoughts. So feeling dissatisfied is the feeling of it. We only notice the thoughts when we get to the level of feeling because we don't notice our mind deep down. But using the Buddhist techniques as we progress, and I'm talking about quite, sophisticated progression in your practice, there's really good concentration and a lot of inner work. You start to notice your conceptual stories well before they get to the level of the body in daily life. We have that our tragedy in our culture is we only notice what we're thinking deep down when it gets to that body, when we feel it, and that's too late. That's just way too late. We have to really learn to be very sophisticated, you know, conceptual, cognitive therapists. I'm really not kidding. This is exactly Buddha's view. And only with, as you get more and more concentration, do you start to hear these constant layers and layers and layers of conceptual stories, just 1,000 thoughts a second. What we even hear in daily life is like the tip of the iceberg. You know? This conceptuality goes to really subtle levels. And that's the skill of the Buddhist approach to the mind. It's giving you the ability of concentration so we can go to those deeper levels and to begin to hear these conceptual stories, begin to hear the conceptual stories, this script in our head. So by changing the script in our head, slowly, 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 like changing the script from knowing no music to knowing music. We get that process. We're prepared to work hard to do that. We know that learning the theory doesn't mean you play Bach overnight. We're not disappointed. But we think, but we're sort of craving this dissatisfaction is so intense. We can't bear the pain and we just want an immediate fix, you know. So it's a slow, gradual process of learning to be more satisfied, which is a mental state. It is a concept. And it takes time. But you have to practice every day. You can't be a pianist if you don't practice every day. Are we communicating here?
Yes.
Okay. We have to have patience and humility and practice slowly. So any questions, people? Questions on Zoom?
Yes, question. Hi, Venerable Robina, can you hear me?
How old was Matthew Perry?
They said he was 54. Apparently he had, this is another point. There's another point I find interesting. Everybody has dissatisfaction. We all have attachment. So if you have attachment to killing people, then you're seen as a monster because you've got the habit to kill from past life. So you have attachment to that. Or you could be attached to shouting at people and you're seen as horrible if you do that. Okay, what am I getting at? What am I getting at? Okay, what am I getting at is, forget all that. I think in our culture, in our psychological models, we don't factor in ethics, good ethics. So people, I mean, it seems like people like Matthew Perry, I mean, just from reading about him, I'm going to use him as an example because he's in the news, the poor guy, you know, he won't mind, he's dead. He seemed like a nice person. You get my point, like a really nice person. People adored him, he was kind, he was funny, he wasn't mean to people. Do you understand? So that means we could argue he had fairly good ethics. But if you've also got this dissatisfaction, but you've got really bad ethics and you lie and steal and kill, no one's going to like you. And in psychology, so they're the people who go to these therapists and they're the ones that the world thinks are a disaster. But the difference is they don't have good ethics. It's not being rude. You can be a person who's got massive attachment and jealousy. No, attachment, but you don't get jealous very much. You don't hurt other people very much. You don't lie. You don't steal. You don't kill. So if we are brave enough, and if we start to identify it and to be happy that we've got good ethics. I mean, I'm not even thinking about Matthew Perry. I don't know about the man. I don't know about that. I can't say that. Maybe his dissatisfaction was so, and it was. Some people are such good people. People adore them. And their suffering is so severe. You know, their dissatisfaction, their self-loathing basically is so severe because self-loathing is dissatisfaction. It's another word for it. His Holiness Dalai Lama said it was, he could see it in the West. He said it's like a, and of course he said it's a mental illness, which of course is what the Buddha is saying. The word affliction is mental illness, that's all. And that's very strongly in our culture. It's the way our attachment functions. Very powerful self-loathing. Total dissatisfaction with oneself, you know. So what I'm getting at is, we can have minds that are very crazy up and down, let's say like that. Which is another discussion. But if we've got good ethics, I think that is our saving grace. If we can use our good ethics, you know, meaning you don't want to kill or steal or lie or harm people. That's pretty powerful. They're very good qualities to have. We should acknowledge those. We sort of don't, I think we just don't factor these in much in modern psychology, I don't think. Because it sounds too judgmental to talk about ethics.
I have a question.
Yeah.
When you talk about modern psychology, you're saying kind of opposed it to the Buddhist concept in a way that modern psychology says that we need that anger, all those dark sides are parts of us, while Buddhism says that we can eradicate that.
Yeah.
My question is,
Yeah.
how do we have that mindset of eradicating and not creating aversion to things?
I understand. No, it's a really
parts?
good, it's a really, really, really good question. I agree with you. I agree with you totally. I agree totally. It's a really good question. So again, I have to use ordinary examples. When you're playing the piano and you're learning to play Bach, you want to play it as well as possible, don't you? And if every time, if you're playing, you really know you've got potential, you've got to know you've got potential. So as you're playing the music and you can hear yourself, once you practice well enough, you can hear the slight, you're not quite right with that chord. You'll practice it and practice it, but you won't go kill yourself and think you're disgusting and want to murder yourself just because you can't play the chord right. Because you know you've got potential, you aim to continue to lessen the wrong chord and get it right. Same here. But do you understand my point? We want to do things perfectly, and nothing wrong. See, there's nothing wrong with that. The reason we use it to beat ourselves up is the dissatisfaction one. So, because even though, or like another example, if you're learning music, I use the analogy, and you've learned music and you get to grade 1 and you've passed your exam. If you've got a fairly satisfied nature, you'd be so excited. Oh, mummy, I just passed grade 1. You'd be so happy. And that'll energize you now to go to grade 2. Whereas if you're never satisfied, you'll beat yourself up. I'm only at grade 1. No matter you get to grade 197, you'll still be miserable. So it's a question of learning to know you want to get better because you've got the potential to get better and you identify with that potential, but not put yourself down because you're not there yet. It's a fine line. It's an important psychological process.
It's accepting to get rid of it.
Pardon?
It's accepting to get rid of it.
It's accepting that you're at this point, but you're moving forward. We do it with everything we're trying to. If you become the best tennis player, the best mathematician, we aim for that. We love doing the best, even just playing anything we love. We want to be the best at it. That's good to have. Not to be, it's good to have that and to aim for that. And then every time you do it, you get a bit better and you delight in it. But you don't beat yourself up because you're not there yet. With dissatisfaction would be, no matter how far you get with your music, you'd always be dissatisfied. I mean, you'd be tortured, which is like putting yourself down. Are we not communicating? You're not saying.
Is that what Matthew Perry did? He had 100 million.
What? Sorry, what?
Is that what Matthew Perry did? He had 100 million people who liked it, but he wasn't happy because his mom.
Well, I mean, yeah, we can say like that for him if you like, because he always, yeah, you could say from what you're reading about him, his own memoir. That's a bit different. He's talking more about here, you're discussing your own self, isn't it? As soon as, that's where psychologically we get very nervous about, it makes it, we think it sounds terrible to think, no, as soon as we hear, as soon as we hear the Buddha say that attachment and anger and jealousy and low self-esteem are not at the core of our being and are the source of our suffering and can be eventually eradicated, it terrifies us. Because we then conclude, oh, I must be bad. So then we think the other option is, well, anger and jealousy are necessary good parts of a person. That's another extreme, but maybe the way to go, I don't know what to say, is if the only way to look at it is if it is true that anger is the cause of my suffering, I have to find that out myself, not to see it as a theory. And then when you know it is causing you pain, then it's not judgment, it's just practical. When you know it's causing you pain, if it's just theoretical, oh, I'm angry, I'm a bad person. See, that's the one about, oh my God, the one about, I'm a bad person is always the conclusion we come to, which is guilt. So again, you can bring guilt back to this attachment to being approved of. Since a little boy, you've heard mummy said, don't do this. God said, don't do this. The police, the government, sister, auntie, uncle, and you've internalized as you're a tiny kid, born, you, like the rest of us, born with this our own levels of attachment, and maybe let's just say you've got, just using you as an example, say you've got bucket loads of need to be approved of, which is this attachment we're talking about. That's primordial since you're a tiny baby. And when mummy smiles at you, that part of you just, oh, I must have done the right thing. Mummy smiled at me. And all the time we're hearing grandma, grandpa, God, the government saying you've got to do this and God, so we internalize that. And even you don't even need mummy in the kitchen, because when you break the cup, you don't need mummy to even see you. It's as if she's seen you, because then you go, oh, I'm a bad person, because you know you're not supposed to break a cup. So we use it against ourselves. When, as soon as we say, I did something bad, A wise way to use that as what's interesting. Did I do it or not? Yes, I must have. And then you decide you don't want to do it again, like playing the wrong chord. You don't torture yourself because you're playing the wrong chord. You know you've got potential to play the right chord. You want to own the fact that you played the wrong chord, not hide it and feel guilty and judge yourself. I'm a bad person. I'm a bad musician. So it's a kind of a grown-up attitude of owning the fact that you're an ordinary human being with attachment and jealousy and anger, recognizing they cause you such pain that you want to go beyond it. So you are the beneficiary of that, and it's owning it. It's really quite deep. It's quite difficult because we love to have guilt. We love to turn it against ourselves. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's really hard because we guilt is one of our favorite states of mind, you know. We kind of jump in ahead of being judged by another. We say, oh, I'm bad, before anybody else can say it, you know.
Venerable, you have 3
Yeah.
questions.
Okay, good. Go on then. Tell me.
So,
Okay.
Yudi,
Okay, talk to me, Yuji, sweetheart.
Hi, can you hear me?
Talk to me. Yes.
Can you hear me?
Can't hear a thing. Talk to me now.
Can you hear me now?
Why
Hello.
can't I hear her?
we can't hear her.
Her hand is off, her little thing is off.
I think the sound here is not working good.
My sound is full on.
Yeah.
Can't hear you, sweetheart.
You
I know, I
can
don't know
hear
why.
me?
Let's try
She's
Sandy.
muted. She's not muted.
What do you say?
Venerable Sandy would be the next person.
No, wait a minute, I'm trying to work out with Yudi.
Sandy, you want to
Just a moment, please. I'm talking to Yudi. We're trying to get
Okay.
Yudi to come. How come? What's happening? Who's going out there? What's going on?
If you turn up your volume, maybe.
My volume's full.
That's not my
Oh,
heart.
There you go.
Yudi, see if you can talk again.
Okay, can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Doesn't work. Sweetheart, I don't know what to do. We'll sort it out, Yudi. We'll come back to you in a minute.
I can hear her.
Sandy. Talk, Sandy. Sandy, talk to me, sweetheart.
Hello, Venerable. I'm
Can't
wondering.
hear her either. Can't
Oh,
hear you, Sandy. Can't hear anything. What's going on, do you think?
I don't know.
Get Sean, please.
I think
Yeah.
maybe she
We'll
can't.
get back to you guys on Zoom. I don't know. See if Sean can talk. Sean, talk
Yeah.
to me.
Can you hear me?
I
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I could
Nothing.
hear
What?
Yudi. I could
Yeah,
hear
Volume's full on.
Sean.
Hello, hello, hello.
Which one? No.
This shows
I don't think
It's
Venerable. can
minute,
hear
isn't
us.
it?
the MacBook Air speakers won't fix it for you.
Yeah.
That's good.
Hello, hello, testing.
What's the point you just did?
When you
Can you hear me now?
Hang on a second, Alan. Yeah,
when
what
you
you?
hit that little arrow next
I
to
did
the
as I saw it.
microphone,
Which
then
one?
you select a speaker, you just make sure it's.
Speakers. Oh, very good. Okay, great. Thank you. Very kind. Thank you. Okay, now I can hear you, Yudi.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Venerable Robina.
Go, darling. Talk to me.
I have a few questions. You mentioned that for certain people, they just have habits of like they're more easily satisfied. What causes such condition and why are people like that?
Practicing giving up attachment. They must have practiced being more content.
Okay.
From their practice. Why is a person, some people better at music? Why is at this moment in time, why is one person better at playing piano? It's because they've practiced it more. It's as simple as that, actually. There's no secret. It's as simple as that.
Okay.
It's the evidence that they must have practiced being more content.
Great. Great to
You
know.
understand me?
Yeah.
And that usually means we're talking past life, because you see, this is the Buddhist view. The Buddhist view about the mind is a bit more subtle in this sense that we come into this life from programmed from the time of conception with our past habits. And you know, if you want to kill and steal and lie or be good at music, you don't just get that from this life. You bring that with you.
Yeah.
So satisfaction and these things is the same. So yeah, we all know people like that who just seem to be more content in their life, more able to be happy more easily. We can see that, can't we?
Yes.
Do you understand, darling?
Yeah. And another question, which is you mentioned something about satisfaction actually has little to do with our sensory consciousness being stimulated, but rather the projection of our mind that experience pleasure or satisfaction. And what is the cause of pleasure then if it's not if it's not our sensory consciousness?
Pleasure, okay, good point. Yeah, thank you. The pleasure, pleasant, okay, in the Buddhist analysis, there are the negative states of mind, the positive ones, and then you've got another lot that I like to call the mechanics of the mind, and that's a bit odd sounding, but there's some states of mind that are neither negative and neurotic nor virtuous. And so some of those would be like intention, attention, discrimination, good memory. Whether you're a murderer or a meditator, you need these different qualities. These are different qualities we all need to function. So curiously, there's one in that group called simply feeling, and there's not in the way we describe called emotions, but you've either got pleasant feelings, unpleasant feelings, or neutral feelings. And pleasant is another word for happy feelings, pleasant feelings, very pleasant feelings, joyful feelings, blissful feelings, ecstatic feelings. I mean, I'm waiting for those. So you've got two kinds of feeling. Sensory consciousness can have pleasant feelings. That's pretty evident. And then the mental consciousness. And that's the harder one to get, because we're so addicted to our body, we only notice the physical ones. So, you know, and then what happens is, like, you eat the cake, and so you eat the cake, you do have pleasure. Pleasure is triggered, and that is a sensory experience. But the mind is still dissatisfied. So that's attachment. And then that's why you keep eating, waiting for the satisfaction to come, which is mental, but it doesn't come because cake can't do it. Mental satisfaction has to be done by the mental consciousness. You have to learn to be content. That needs training. It's quite hard. Do you understand me?
Yes, I understand you.
Good, good.
Thank you.
That was it. Thank you, darling. Sandy, talk to me.
Hello, Venerable. I'm curious about, you mentioned in the beginning that when you spoke about loneliness, and you mentioned that when you realize emptiness, somehow I connected that when you realize emptiness, there isn't loneliness, and emptiness is so cryptic. Like, is there any way that you can explain what that concept is?
I understand, darling. I understand, Sandy. Well, okay, I'll describe it mainly here, the consequence of realizing it in relation to why attachment to being needed and seen and heard, and therefore loneliness, why they would go then. This sounds pretty abstract to us, Sandy, but the Buddhist approach is that when we're really, forget about all the way to finally realizing emptiness, but as we put it this simple way, as we progress spiritually, which means lessening attachment and emotional hunger, lessening anger, lessening depression, lessening low self-esteem, lessening arrogance, lessening all these unhappy states of mind, which is really hard work. The consequence of that is that you get closer and closer to other people. You therefore feel more connected, more loving, more kind, more fulfilled, and less lonely. So lonely comes when we're really arrogant and really jealous and really, not really, but just all the unhappy states of mind cause us to literally feel separate from others, don't they? Do you hear me? Can you hear that, Sandy?
Yes, yes.
So the more these branch delusions, they, like attachment and anger and jealousy and all those, the main symptom of those in our own daily life is we feel isolated, separate from others, cut off. If you're really angry, you're paranoid. You see the whole world as like enemies. If you're depressed, you can't see anything past your own nose. If you're lonely, all of they are symptoms of a very sad, separate, bereft person. So as you lessen those and you become more loving and more empathetic, you become more connected to others. So you keep growing that, honey child, till eventually you've cut all the delusions, which is quote unquote realizing emptiness. You would have this blissful feeling of connectedness with every damn being on the planet. You got my sense? You see what I'm saying, Sandy?
I understand what you're saying. I just don't get when people talk about emptiness.
Well, it'll come slowly, darling. Don't you worry.
Sure.
Basically, it's okay. The deepest delusion in the mind, the word delusion Buddha uses, the branch delusions are attachment and anger and jealousy. And I call them branches because they are the branches or the main voices of the root delusion, which is this primordial feeling of a separate, concrete, lonely I. So when you've realized that I is a fantasy, that's what they mean by realizing emptiness. You realize it doesn't exist like that. It's a very subtle realization. Do you understand me?
Yes.
Does that help a little bit?
Yes. Thank you,
Right.
Venerable.
Okay, doke. I'm happy. Yes, Sean.
So you were mentioning that like the physical things aren't going to satisfy the mind, but when you
Yeah, right.
start doing some of these practices like guru yoga,
Yeah,
where you're visualizing the guru
yeah,
and integrating the guru into yourself,
yeah.
how is that different?
It's your mental consciousness, isn't it?
Well,
It's
yeah,
just
I
a
mean, I get
technique.
it. I get it's
Yeah,
mental, but
yeah.
it's still, you're still creating an object that's external.
But it doesn't, that's okay. That's all right. Maybe that's okay. If it's no, okay. Okay. So if you analyze, so forget the word guru, but what about the word Buddha? All you're doing is seeing a human being who is manifesting perfection for you, which is the term of Buddha. So by you identifying with Buddha out there, the way they describe those practices is you see Tara, for example, she manifests, she's the embodiment of action and confidence. You see Chenrezig, he's the embodiment of compassion. You know very well what I'm talking about. These different images of Buddhas, they're ways we identify these qualities. And so as they talk about these practices, they say that you're bringing the future results into the present. So they're saying that when you visualize Tara, you're imagining, it's like you're learning to play at Wimbledon and you want to play the best tennis on the planet. You visualize being at Wimbledon and you visualize yourself being the best tennis player on the planet. That is bringing the future result into the present, because the Buddha and the Guru are just you. You with me?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Understand? You know, when you visualize Federer every day, he's your coach, he's your guru, just imagine that. And you want to become like Federer. You want to become your own Federer. It's just a method to use to help you develop your potential. You with me?
Yes, thank you.
Good. Thank you so much. Yes.
I wanted to ask more about loneliness.
Yeah, go on.
So I have a meditation practice for several years.
Yeah.
Maybe this is a phase, but it's a multi-year phase. In some ways, I feel like I'm getting lonelier.
I understand. More separate from others.
You know, I feel connection.
Yeah.
I'm there for people more. And there's like this profound non-reciprocity.
Okay, that's definitely that. Okay, I hear you. That's attachment to being seen and heard. You're absolutely right. So you're noticing it.
Yeah.
You're noticing it. It's not getting worse. You're just noticing it.
It's very painful.
Yes, it is painful, but you're noticing it. And if you can label it accurately, you can change it. And it takes time. It takes time, sweetheart. That's the point. That's why these. I mean, you know, you could say that not being good at music doesn't cause that kind of deep pain. These cause deep pain, isn't it? So when you can see the pain, this is the point, when you can see the pain of attachment, that the pain is causing you, not to revel in it, not to drown in it, not to have self-pity of it, but to see the pain and then wishing all the time to keep practicing so we can slowly heal it. Knowing it's healable. You understand? And time. And that's why these, I don't know if you do the Tibetan Buddhist ones, but this is why in the Vajrayana, these practices of visualizing the Buddha, those types, they're very skillful because they literally call them bringing the future result into the present. So this other practice is, in the first stage, is very painful. You're dealing with the shit. But these kind, you're dealing with the perfection, and it lifts you to identify with what you know you can be by visualizing yourself winning Wimbledon. It lifts you because it is your potential. Instead of all the time fixing your backhand, fixing the forehand, you visualize your potential. It's a very uplifting type of practice, and it can heal. Do you understand?
May I ask it?
Yeah.
Like, you know, that sense of Sangha, a sort of supreme assembly. Is it sort of like, I suppose, is it okay to wish for a solution to loneliness with sort of
Others? Well, no,
divine
okay.
others, or
This is-
do I just simply be with the pain and not really feel?
Well, I mean, you don't know, no, you don't just be, okay. You notice the pain, but you've got to know it's healable. If you think it's an absolute pain and you can't fix it, that's many people, like I'm reading in the papers, no, you've got to notice, and you can't change it, and you learn to live with it. That's probably a solution. At least try to live with it, but also know it's healable. So accepting it. So, okay, another way of putting it, when we see our own mind, whether it's attachment or anger or jealousy, what then happens is we see it, and then what happens is we have aversion to it, and that's a double trouble. So when you get angry, you get angry, you're getting angry. When you see this attachment, and then you have aversion to it. So saying it's painful is aversion to it. Aversion to it, and aversion is anger. So it's like then it's double trouble, you know. Because all attachment wants is to have everything to be lovely. So we see pain in ourselves and see attachment in ourselves and see jealousy and anger, then that arises aversion in our own mind for our very selves. So we have to see the pain it's causing and then identify with our potential and keep practicing instead of having aversion to it, because that destroys. It's so subtle. You understand? Or to see it nakedly, because aversion wants to push it all away. Because as soon as you start to see it more clearly and walk into it, look into it, it dissipates it. Whereas we talk about it as pain, and it's like it's a lump of pain there. But if you go into it and analyze it and don't have aversion to it and see it and analyze it, deconstruct it, which is dependent arising, it dissipates. Apply dependent arising. You understand? Yes.
The question about the root delusion,
Yes.
in particular, why it's a necessary precondition for the branches of attachment and aversion. And then also, like, someone could intellectually say, oh, I'm not an inherent unchanging self,
Sure,
and write it
sure,
1,000 times
sure,
a day.
that's right, won't
And
help.
yet they're still gonna
That's
have
right,
it.
that's right.
So my related question is,
Yeah.
are there any like simple heuristics or practices that
Yeah.
we can put into
I know.
place to be less
Yeah.
caught in the root delusion?
I understand, I understand. This is where, if you're a typical Tibetan Buddhist practitioner, you're going to hear all the lamas talk about your preliminary practices, your non-dros. Well, that's a bit like, you're 20 pounds overweight, you've never picked up a tennis racket, you wouldn't know one end from another, you don't know what a tennis ball is, and then you go to Roger Federer and say, please show me how to play a backhand. We know perfectly well he's going to give you a couple of years of preliminary practices, because you've got to prime your mind and your body to even go back. He'll go back to basics. He's going to get you to do jogging. He's going to get you on a fast. He's going to get you to lose weight. He's going to get you to get fit. Then you can come back and start to play tennis. This is why you have to do preliminary practices. They're just priming your mind, because these delusions are so primordially deep that 1,000 times a day saying the words, 1,000 times a day saying I'm going to be content is not enough. We need to do masses of practices that loosen the grip at a very deep level. Or another way to put it is sometimes, if you're in a difficult relationship and practicing patience and practicing forgiveness and practicing giving up attachment, when you're forced against it, that's when you can really help loosen. If you're forced into the shit and you're working with it, that helps you loosen it a little bit. If we're just floating along, getting attached to what it wants, everything's lovely, nothing shifts. If we're just being nice and comfy, and nothing's going to shift. We need a bit of trouble sometimes. Get deep inside to shake ego up. If we can deal with it, that's really good preliminary practice, I tell you. Do you understand me?
Cultivate more.
What?
Cultivate more difficulty.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Learn to like problems like we like ice cream. And we don't have to invite problems. We see them have 1,000 times a day. There'll be something that will arise that your attachment won't want. So really grabbing those opportunities, that's very powerful.
And
that loosens the grip.
You definitely notice the attachment or aversion. And then how about in terms of this is the root delusion?
Okay, because the root delusion, this is for Sandy now too, the root delusion, it's known as ignorance, simply speaking, ripa, unawareness. And it's what it is this primordial belief in a separate, concrete I. And because it's not true, it brings incredible fear, and then and literally the symptoms of it are then emotional hunger to get what we think it wants to make it feel better. And then aversion is the panic attack when attachment doesn't get what it wants. If we could just understand these three root delusions, I tell you, the consequence in our lives is profound. Because when you realize emptiness, Sandy, I'll give you a story, Sandy, to explain. There's always a story. Lama Zopa, when he was a little boy, he saw them when he was Sherpa. He was a Sherpa when he was about 8. On the other side of this river, he saw these pale-eyed white people. That's how these Sherpas call Western people. Right? And so he wanted to meet these people. So he went across the bridge with this bowl of boiled potatoes as his gift and fell in the river before he got there. So there he is in the water. And the way he told the story later, he said, first of all, he said, the head, there's a whole bunch of stuff here. The head came to the surface for air. He didn't say, I came to the surface for air. He said, the head. And this is very much a part of the way you look into the eye and you talk very objectively, the head, this and blah, 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 whatever. But then he could see his manager having a panic attack running along the bank, losing this little Rinpoche. Then he kept going down again into the water because they don't teach him swimming up there, of course. And then he said to himself, he said, so he said, the thought occurred to me. The person known as the Laudo Lama, he'd been recognized as a little boy as this reincarnated Lama, the yogi. He said, the person known as the Laudo Lama, the thought occurred to me, the person known as the Laudo Lama was about to die. And then he said, I didn't know anything about emptiness, so there was no fear. So the background to this is he's recognized as a reincarnated yogi as a little boy. That implied he was seen to be this Laudo Lama, this yogi who spent the last 30 years of his previous life up in the mountains, who clearly had, quote unquote, realized emptiness, meaning, Sandy, cut the root delusion and finally realized that there never has been, isn't, and never could be that fantasy self that this ego grasping is grasping at primordially, which is rooted in fear and schizophrenic, dualistic, completely demented, a total fantasy made up that then has this massive emotional hunger to continually try to fill it up, but all it's a fantasy because it doesn't exist. I mean, it sounds weird. This fantasy I doesn't exist. So he said there was no fear, which means he had realized emptiness. He had realized the non-duality of his own I, but because he didn't grasp at an I, there was no fear. Therefore, no attachment, therefore, no anger. Not possible, impossible, because they are the symptoms of this primordial assumption of a separate I. I mean, it sounds weird to think that we have all these states of mind that are based in fantasy, but that's literally what Buddha is saying. They're based in fantasies. We've made them up. There's no basis in reality. This is very hard to hear because they're so deep in us. Does that make sense?
Thank you, Venerable.
Good, Sandy, darling, happy. Who are other questions here? Yes, sweetheart, go.
So I'm doing my non-draw and
Good.
I recite the refuge prayer like so many times.
That's right.
That sometimes it's mechanical. Like I.
That's right. Exactly. Of course.
So what I try sometimes to do, and that's my question.
Yeah.
It's try to generate the feeling of refuge.
Yeah.
But sometimes I use things that I'm attached to.
I understand that
because they give me refuge.
do what you can.
Is it better to just recite it mechanical or
okay, so but you do mean well, don't you? You do want it to be sincere, don't you? You are trying. It's a bit like if you're practicing that backhand 42 times. It gets boring after a while, but you do want to get better at backhand, don't you?
Yeah.
So as long as that's there, you keep doing it with sincerity.
Okay, but what I mean, is it better? The sincerity is there, but is it if sometimes I try to say kind of in order to feel what the refuge, if I try to think of something that I'm attached to.
No, but why
because
think about your Lama? Don't you have a Lama?
I do, but
is that enough for you? No, not enough.
But sometimes
We can't force
in order to it is.
Sweetheart, we can't force
Yeah.
feelings, all right?
Yeah.
But as long as you have intellectual certainty about these, do you have confidence in these practices?
Absolutely.
And you want to be sincere?
Absolutely.
Well, then, honey, child, relax. You can't
Okay.
force feelings.
Okay.
You can't force feelings, darling.
Okay.
Just, relax,
Yeah.
be happy, and know that everything that your mind doesn't go astray. You're programming. It's
Yeah.
like you're practicing that backhand. You give yourself a break occasionally and look at the sky, but go back to it again. Because you're programming your mind, basically.
Yeah.
And have confidence in the techniques.
Yeah.
And relax, it's all right. It's okay.
Thank you
It's
so
okay.
much. Venerable.
Venerable, a question from somebody on Zoom.
So who has questions here? Hang on. One. Okay, you too, darling. Okay. Hang on, chicken. Who here? Yudi again.
No, a question was from,
I'll go.
doesn't have a mic, they don't, their mic
Okay, go.
doesn't work. So in chat, they ask, I have a question regarding a sleep apnea diagnosis that I wake up every couple of hours because I stop breathing.
Yes.
How do I accept this as part of my practice?
Don't accept it, fix it. There's lots of methods to fix it, please. Please try and fix it, sweetheart. There's lots of methods to fix it, darling. There's many methods. Please persevere. Bugger your practice. Go fix it, okay? That's what we say in Australia. It sounds really to Americans. Try and fix it, sweetheart. And if you really try, I mean, I believe there are methods. I don't know if you've done your research enough, sweetheart. I mean, you don't want to choke to death. It's a hassle to wake up all the time. But I really do feel confident there are methods there. So if you want to answer me on that and tell me that you've looked at every method, then please. But that's what I've heard. It's a difficult one, darling. I'm sorry. But if you want to say something back to me, please write a note.
Yeah, okay.
Okay,
And then
yes.
also Yudi has a question.
Okay, wait, yeah, go.
My question around indulgence, and where
Which one?
my question around indulgence.
Indulgence.
Yes.
Sounds like a Catholic thing, indulgences. Go
So
on.
thinking back on the story of the cake, in my personal experience, there's a cake I'm chasing, let's just use the cake analogy for argument's sake. And I've always wanted a cake and I've never allowed myself to go and have that cake.
You've never
Never.
got good discipline.
Yes, German.
Well done, girl.
Now I'm thinking, maybe part of my healing process is to allow myself to go for that cake, and then I will see the dissatisfaction and I can learn from that rather than keep chasing after this cake. But I don't know if I'm just playing.
So cake is an analogy for, in general, your approach to not following attachment. Is that what you're talking about?
I'm not sure.
Okay, so listen, darling, listen. We can see, can't we, that you could be a very disciplined person, very stoic, and you never eat the cake, and you never jump on too many boys, and you try to control yourself. That, in theory, is a really good practice, but if it doesn't satisfy you, if it doesn't make you feel better about yourself, which it should do, that would nourish your heart, if you can rejoice in that and be delighted. But you can also use it as a weapon against yourself if it becomes neurotic.
But isn't indulging into that also negative?
Indulgence, you mean kind of, what do you mean? Give me an
Like eating so much cake, I want to vomit.
Well, but that's not going to bring satisfaction. So where's the point? I'm missing the point here now.
I feel guilt around trying to go for something that I want.
Okay, so wait a minute. I'm a bit confused. Start again.
Yeah.
Start again. Keep it simple for me.
What I'm trying to understand is part of the analogy that you were using.
Say it again, darling. What?
When you were talking about earlier with the cake analogy,
Yes.
you're always assuming that people will feel badly once they've eaten the cake because they will never be satisfied.
So what are you suggesting here?
I'm wondering whether I don't know how to explain it quite well.
So what you're saying is you have very good discipline and you never overeat.
But that doesn't give me satisfaction.
No, okay, so you never overeat. Okay, so this is my point. So so I'm not trying to be too personal, but now you're talking about it. The reason you don't overeat is why? Because you want to keep thin.
Oh no, it's another.
Because why?
Analogy.
Okay, so why would a person want to not eat too much cake in this example you're using?
Because of shame.
Shame about what?
I don't know, I've been brought up to feel.
Sorry, what?
I've been brought up to feel shame for things that
So shame to eat too much food, for example.
Yes.
Shame why? You have to analyze it, please. Explain what you mean. Why is that bad?
Because society says it's bad, and I believe.
To eat too much is not.
Yeah.
So it's more behavior. So to be seen to be eating too much, but you can do it privately.
I guess. And I'm trying to understand what's the healthy way of going about this. What's the
Okay, so okay, I hear you, darling, I hear you. Okay. It could be for one person, let's say, for example, you've been brought up by a person, let's say, who's totally attached to reputation so much they teach you never overeat because it's bad manners. That's their attachment. So if you just do that out of attachment to be seen as a good girl, it's just the same as eating too much and not being satisfied with that. But if you're going to continue to be that way, then rejoice that you've got good discipline. You rejoice, you practice being, it won't make you if you're expecting to feel happy out of that habit, you've got to cultivate feeling happy if you think it's a good habit.
What if I don't know if it's a good habit?
What, darling?
I don't know if it's a good habit or not. Like I constantly judge myself on whether something is good or bad in a very
Well, you've got to work, we've got to have a basis for what is good or bad. We need a basis here. So the Buddha's view of what ethics is, from the point of view of the obvious level of ethics is to not harm another. Not because God said, which is the Christian teaching, and that's why it's wrong, because God said, not because Buddha said, but because guess what? People don't like being harmed. That's the first level of ethics, which is a really nice one. Now, the other more subtle one is the Buddha would suggest don't kill, don't steal, don't lie, don't jump on too many boys, and then indeed you can extrapolate, don't eat 14 pieces of cake. Why? Because, sweetheart, that will harm you. Why? Because it won't bring happiness. It won't bring satisfaction. That's his analysis. We've got to find that out. But if you've been so trained and you are, don't worry about your mum, just yourself, your own mind is such that you're very trained in discipline, not to eat too much, not to jump on too many boys. It's theoretically good, but if you're just using it as a weapon to beat yourself up, then there's no benefit, is there? So you've got to analyze it yourself. So good ethics for you, for oneself, is to try not to follow the emotional hunger, follow anger, follow jealousy, follow depression. They're the inner ones, because they will only cause pain. So we have to learn to identify them. So whatever's behind, so you, seems to me, if it's true, this one you're using, being a good girl, behaving nicely, not eating too much, that's your attachment, is being a good girl.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
Yeah.
Not so much attached to not eating food. To perhaps being a good girl.
Yeah.
And that one, so then selling yourself you're a good, so the antidote to that is to not necessarily eat too much, to be but simply to learn to be, actually it's a good quality and I'm delighted in it and I'm choosing it. Not doing it because you want mummy's approval, you're doing it because you choose it. That's the big difference. You choose it because you see the advantage of it. That's then it will become virtue for you. Do you see what I'm saying? Yeah. Yeah. Good, thank you so much. Interesting. Yes.
So what's your thoughts on pain, failure, almost misery is good for you? Because without failure, you can't appreciate success.
That's true.
Without pain,
That's
you
true.
can't appreciate.
Well, no, I think
happiness.
I'd like to argue with that. I think we've done this one before. I've got a feeling. Okay, because we're dumb, we wait till we've been punched in the nose to realize we don't like being punched in the nose. But I think we can learn that before we get punched. In other words, if you come along and are nice to me, I don't think I need to be punched by you first in order to appreciate your kindness. But for ourselves, we're a bit thick and we don't pay attention and we wait till suffering happens. And if we're fortunate, we can learn from it. But I don't think everybody learns from it. Have a look at the world.
Yeah, but sometimes, like when you talk about champions, like Fred Warren or any of these athletes, a lot of times they don't really become champions until they lost and they got that defeat, and they're like they felt that misery.
Sure. So I think, well, using that,
happen again.
I understand. So using that in terms of developing our human qualities of kindness and love and compassion, when the bad thing happens, you get really angry, you can learn from it and decide, I don't want that anymore. So yes, we can use that for sure. But I don't think you need to get angry in order to discover that anger hurts you. You can see it by seeing others. So we can learn from it without having to have it, I think. But we often wait till we have it before we learn, which is a bit sort of, do you understand?
Yeah, no, I get it.
You don't have to break your leg in skiing to learn that it's not cool to break it. You can learn from other people's experiences if you want to, if you're wise. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I get it.
Yeah.
And to
It's a
your
good point.
about
And that's a good, we do learn from suffering. If we're brave enough, suffering experiences can be very powerful for us. Isn't it? So true, isn't
It's a
it?
big
If we're
motivator.
brave enough.
It's a motivator for most people.
Absolutely. Yeah, I know exactly. It's true. No, it's true.
And
Yes.
you said that problems arise on their own anyway.
I know we don't have to invite them, do we? They're all around us, aren't they? It's true. What else? Anybody there?
Question from Judy.
Yuri, you go, sweetheart.
Thank you so much, Venerable Robina. I have another question about seeing the guru as the Buddha. Were you
Okay,
always able to see Lama Zopa Rinpoche perfect as Buddha? And how do you reorient your attention to focus on their virtue and not their flaws? And how do one do that?
How do you learn to see somebody's virtues and not their faults? Is that your question?
Like how, like seeing your Lama as the Buddha, which basically just focusing on their virtue, right? And then like having
So
trust.
first of all, you have got a person you call your guru, have you?
Yes.
And you do want to learn to practice seeing him as Buddha. And why would you want to do that? You look at the logical reason first. Why would you want to?
Because by training our mind that way, I will be able to activate my own Buddhist nature that way.
And you have confidence in that approach? That makes sense to you?
Yes, that makes sense to me.
So what's the question therefore?
When you notice your guru has flaws, what do you
Like what do you mean by flaws? You mean because Rinpoche stutters and doesn't say words clearly? What do you mean by that?
No.
What does he do that's got a flaw? For example.
Well, I really don't want to slander my guru.
Give an example.
Okay.
With a pure view, what do you mean?
Okay, for example, there are propensity and tendency that even my guru admit that it's her flaw. And I'm a psychotherapist, so I'm very good at observing people's like
so
flaws.
tell me an example of a flaw in a person that you might call your guru. What do you mean by that? Give an example. I mean, if you're talking about seeing anger, you're talking about seeing mental problems in Lama Zopa, is that what you're discussing?
Yeah.
You see him as being angry, for example. You see him as being angry, do you, for example?
Like prejudice or like.
Or you mean you might interpret some of his words as being racist or something? Is that what you're suggesting? Or sexist or something? Is that what you're suggesting?
Sure, we can use an example. That's not the quality of my guru, but like
you said prejudiced.
Prejudice more like don't like Americans, want me to go back to China, and like or like
so you mean Lama Zopa, you're telling me that Lama Zopa doesn't like Americans? What are you saying?
Oh, I'm not saying Lama Zopa, I'm saying my
What
Lama.
are you saying, you did?
Like
forgive me, for I'm not shouting. I think you can criticize me now for shouting. Can you give me a simple example of a person? Don't be nervous. Just give me an example of a fault that you see in this person, some fault that you're seeing. I need to see what you're saying, sweetheart.
Okay.
Yudi, talk to me. She disappeared behind her glasses.
Okay.
Okay, is the fault something to do with like a delusion, like anger or jealousy or something like that? Or is that the kind of fault you mean, or do you mean picking their nose or speaking badly? What is it, a physical thing or is it a mental thing that you're seeing?
It's a mental thing.
So you're suggesting that you're seeing in this person a delusion. Delusion is the term used for a faulty state of mind. Is that what you're suggesting? You're seeing a delusion in somebody by their words. Is that what you're saying?
Kind of, yes.
Kind of. Yudi, if you say kind of, I have to give a kind of answer. Give me an exact.
Okay, fine. I'll give an example.
Okay, let me give you an example.
Okay.
So it seems quite difficult here, you psychotherapists. You know, God, I wouldn't come to you for problems. I'm joking, darling. There's Lama Zopa, my teacher, and he was in France at our center there one time, and I needed to ask a question. So Venerable Annette, the nun, took me to Rinpoche's room, and I was outside, and Venerable Annette went in, and I could see Rinpoche there, and Annette said, Rinpoche, Robina's outside and wants a quick word, and Rinpoche didn't reply, and Annette repeated, Rinpoche, Robina wants to have a quick word, and Rinpoche didn't reply, and Annette said it a third time, and Rinpoche didn't reply. So she came out and shrugged, and I thought, okay, so if I'm being pathetic and self-piteous, I think, how dare my guru not want to speak to me? I'm so bad, he can't be a good person. Or I decide, wow, what's the teaching in that, Robina? Honey child, you've got two options. One, you see it as a bloody teaching for your mind, or two, you have self-pity and think, what a mean person. So you've got two options. You have to decide. That's the answer. Are we communicating now?
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good, darling. It's your call. It's your call deciding, you know. Yes, Sandy.
Hello, Venerable.
Hello, darling.
Thank you so much for, clarifying a lot of things. And something that I just had an aha moment. So
Good.
I used to live in another country, and in this country, a lot of like females don't uproot themselves in their homeland and go live and
Understand, darling.
right.
Yeah. Yes.
And so a lot of questions that would come from the society would be, don't you want to get married? Don't you feel
That's
lonely?
right. Exactly.
Aren't you afraid of being here all
Yes.
by yourself?
Exactly.
And in the beginning, it never got to me. In the beginning, I was really strong, and this is
Okay.
no
Good,
this
darling. What's the question,
nothing.
Sandy? What's the question?
After a while, it started to affect me. So I'm wondering,
Mhm.
is like you were talking about their mind, and is it like their mind?
Honey, I'm not talking about them. I'm interested in you. What's your problem?
So
Sandy?
my
What's your
problem was,
problem, darling? Yeah.
it started to affect
So
my
what's
mind.
your problem? What's the name of your problem? How can we, I want to solve your problem, not these other people. So suddenly
That
you're affected by these people with their views about what ladies should do. So what's your problem about this?
is that I don't want that to affect me. I want
Okay,
to
so how is it affecting you, Sandy? What's it making you feel?
it makes me question myself. Like it
Okay, so it's basically
me.
it's family expressing this to you, is it?
No, it's just the country I used to live in, just the
Okay,
people I used
I
to live
understand.
in.
So
Yeah.
why does it make you question? You know perfectly well that you feel, okay, do you feel confident that you have the right to choose your own life? Do you feel like that's your choice?
Yes, and
No, Sandy, do you feel now that these people's views are upsetting you, look again at your mind. Do you feel it's reasonable that you, Sandy, as a human being, whether you're a girl or a boy or a bipolar or a binary, I don't care. Do you feel that you as a human being have the right to make your own decisions in life? Do you feel that?
yes.
Okay, then just keep convincing yourself about that, because it's pretty reasonable, isn't it? Just because people have deluded views about what you should do doesn't mean you have to buy into them, does it, and be affected by it. Look at it, be careful, don't just deny it, but then you use logic to argue with it, Sandy. Don't you think so?
Yes.
Good going. Very good. Thank you. Who else? More than person with the sleep apnea said something.
She hasn't,
Okay.
she hasn't written back.
Okay, darling. Yeah. But if you can't fix it, then, and I sincerely hope you can, then it's hard to make it practice. I think if you keep waking up all the time, but you try to do your best. And I think that's a good point. Here, we're discussing before too, that is that, yeah, okay, I will answer it then. If you can't solve that problem, like if you've got a pain in your knee and you can't fix it, like, you've broken your toe and you can't fix it, well, then this is the point now, and this is getting to the point that I was saying to you. This is the thing we have to see. One, the body is one thing, and even sleep apnea is physical. Waking up in the middle of the night is physical. The pain in the knee is physical. The broken toe is physical. And they are definitely feelings of pain, fact. But then you've got your mental consciousness, and we have to learn to decide to interpret them differently. So the sleep apnea is waking up all the time, but I would suggest that it's the aversion to it and the stress and the frustration that's what causes the exhaustion. So when we stub our toe, which is physical, and then we get angry, and then we say, well, of course I'm angry, I stubbed my toe. Of course I get frustrated because I keep waking up at night. No, they're physical experiences, and we can change our mental approach to them. That's practice. That's the miracle. The physical is one thing, that's a sensory consciousness, and then your mental consciousness is another. And that's what practice is. That's my answer to you, darling. It's huge. And this is practice every second of the day. Distinguish between your sensory consciousness, your physical body experiences, and your interpretation of them. This is the miracle. But because we're so addicted to wanting pleasant feelings every second, the millisecond an unpleasant feeling arises in the body, then immediately attachment's not getting what it wants. So we have aversion, and we get angry and upset and frustrated. That's what causes us suffering. not the pain. This is what's fascinating. And that's why if you read the obituary of Lama Zopa, have you seen the obituary of Lama Zopa? It came out
it's
recently.
really good.
That one, yeah. You can see he's so practiced, he's a bodhisattva, that when he had his stroke, this is what Venerable Roger, I interviewed, you saw it, the way I wrote it. I interviewed Venerable Roger, and it was so clear. When Rinpoche had his stroke in the hospital, he was exactly the same mentally. Mentally, he had so trained himself. This is the point about bodhisattvas. He'd given up attachment, he'd given up aversion, and he's given up ego grasping. So therefore, he was exactly the same. And if anything, as Venerable Roger said, even more compassionate, more empathetic, more wishing to help others, more joyful mentally. So distinguish between the physical and the mental is a tremendously powerful thing to do, I tell you. But it demands real self-awareness, you know. We can learn to reinterpret our experiences. This is the point, you know. That should do us, I think. 9 o'clock, it's about time to go home, I think. It's enough, isn't it? Food for thought. I mean, we did an hour and a half. People tell me these 1-minute videos is enough food for thought for 1 minute. So we did 90 of them, okay? We did 90 videos tonight. Or if I did a really long one, I did a long one today, it's 45 videos we've just done. So I'll divide it up into 45 videos tonight. I'll have the next 6 months covered. Understand? We're communicating here?
Yeah.
Good. Keep moving, people. Keep knowing we've got potential. Keep knowing we can play like Federer. Keep knowing we can recognize our mistakes and know that they're holding us back and they cause us pain, and we can grow. So that also means you live with it. You happily greet your anger, you greet your jealousy, you greet your low self-esteem. You see it's there and you don't define yourself by it. That's the key point. What happens is we define ourselves by it. I am depressed. I am jealous. I am no good. No, no, no. The Catholics, the Christians have a lovely saying. They say, don't criticize the sinner, criticize the sin. So don't criticize yourself, but notice the anger hurts you, the jealousy hurts you, the depression hurts you. So you isolate it when you don't define this whole self by it. That's the one to be very strong about. You understand? You understand? Do you understand that point? Changchob Senchob Rinpoche Makye Panam Ke Guchi Ke Panyampa Me Payam Gongne Gondu Fabasho Gewadi Nudu Dag Lama Sange Drugune Drovachi Kyak Marupa Dei Sala Gopasho. Lama Zopa's prayer, please. Can you put it up on the screen? I'll read it out. Swift return. We'll read this little prayer. Lou, read. I'm sorry, I didn't talk to you. What's your question, Lou? Give us your question, Lou. Sweetie.
Thank you so much.
Okay, darling.
I wondered if you had any advice, which possibly what you just said gave it, but around understanding the feeling of rushing. So I think things like anger and frustration, I find easier to identify. Okay,
rushing is attachment. Never satisfied with this second. You're pushing, always pushing yourself to get better, pushing yourself to do more. That's attachment energy. That's attachment energy, sweetheart. So don't just, the pushing is like relaxing into, I mean, putting it simply, this minute is okay, this second's okay. It's never being satisfied, never being satisfied, never being satisfied. So push, push, push. I understand very well. I'm just like that.
Mm-hmm. And I guess any advice on the antidote?
Where is the antidote? Go slowly. I mean, don't try and be happy with this minute. It's okay. It's like, it's okay. It's relaxed. It's okay, Lou. Relax, you know. It's okay. All is good. It's okay, Lou. Everything's fine. You sort of talk to yourself. It's okay. Everything's fine. It's okay. All is good. Everything's fine. Like that. Kind of, it's okay, Lou. Give yourself a break. It's all right, sweetheart. Kind of yourself, you know, like that to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Like sort of, you know.
Thank you very much.
Simple. It's a simple way. Notice it, you know, because it's like pushing, never satisfied, never satisfied. So try to say it's all okay, it's all okay, everything's fine, all good, it's okay, everything's fine. Like that, talk like that to yourself. I do that all the time. Do you understand me? Lou, try it out. All right, sweetheart.
Thank you.
Got the prayer there?
Sorry.
We'll just think it in the minds and just think it's always done on a prayer. The Lama Zopa Rinpoche, that he was asked to do this prayer. I forget what he said, I don't memorize the prayer, but to please come back quickly, Rinpoche, and continue teaching us. That's it. So I strongly want him to come back. If you don't know him, then It's okay, learn about him if you like, so that we can continue to benefit from his teachings and his marvelous example. That's it. Okay, darlings. See you next time. Thanks, sweethearts.